Vladimir Putin had everything: a powerful fleet, bases in Crimea, Caliber cruise missiles, an S-400 air defense shield, and a decades-long naval doctrine aimed at controlling the Black Sea. In contrast, Ukraine had almost no navy left. Putin knew this, and he believed he could strangle Ukraine from the sea in the Black Sea, cut off its grain exports to cripple its economy, and pound its coastal cities with Caliber missiles to break its will. In the early months, the plan seemed to be working. The Russian Navy roamed the Black Sea freely, raining missiles on Ukraine's coast, choking the grain corridor, and posing a threat of amphibious landings from the sea. Then the momentum broke, and it never returned. The Russian Navy, once the undisputed master of the Black Sea, has today been forced into a humiliating retreat toward its own shores. Putin's fleet, which he believed to be invincible, has no choice but to abandon Crimea step by step and flee under the onslaught of asymmetric strike. Russia, which controlled the Black Sea with over 80 ships and support vessels at the start of the war, had lost approximately 30% of that fleet by April 2026. But the real story lies not in the loss rate, but in the desperation the fleet has fallen into. The ships can no longer operate in open waters. The legendary 240-year-old base of Sevastopol is no longer a safe harbor. On the contrary, it has become a hunting ground for Ukrainian drones. The remaining ships were forced to take refuge in Novorossiysk, but even that is no longer considered safe. Russia's Black Sea fleet is trapped between Crimea and the Azov Sea. Every port has turned into a death trap, and the operations of the past few weeks have been the most devastating phase of this campaign. On the night of April 18th to 19th, Ukraine's primary special unit infiltrated the Gulf of Sevastopol. Their targets were two massive landing ships, the Yamal and the Nikolai Filchenkov, which form the backbone of Russia's operational force in the Black Sea and are worth over $150 million in total. Yamal and Nikolai Filchenkov. Kamikaze drones targeted the command bridges of both ships. This was no coincidence. Ukraine has developed a rule in this war: strike the most expensive and hardest to replace component. When attacking air defense systems, they target the radars, not the launchers. Because without radar, even the S-400 becomes a blind weapon. The same logic applied to the ships. Piercing the hull causes temporary damage, but destroying the bridge permanently cripples the ship. Radars, control systems, and all electronic infrastructure are concentrated in this area. The hits are clearly visible in the videos, and the intelligence directorate confirmed that both ships were taken out of service. But what happened that night in Sevastopol was far greater than that. Ukraine didn't just strike the ships, it dismantled the entire protective network surrounding the fleet in a single night. Coastal surveillance radars were destroyed, communication networks facilitating inter-unit coordination were severed, sabotage prevention boats guarding the port were struck, and the fuel depot in Kozachia Bay was set ablaze. Consider what this means. Without radar, you cannot see the threat. Without communication, you cannot coordinate. Without your patrol boats, the gates to your port remain wide open, and if your fuel is burning, nothing can move anyway. Ukraine brought down all these layers at once in a single operation. OSINT analyses show that a total of 5 Russian ships were affected in Sevastopol over those 3 days: the Yamal and Filchenkov, as well as the Azov, Olshansky, and the intelligence ship Slavutich. Military observer Alexander Kovalenko sums up the situation. These ships are now nothing more than museum pieces. And Kovalenko is right, because the issue isn't the extent of the damage, but Russia's inability to compensate for it. So can Russia replace these losses with new ships? The short answer, no. And behind this no lies Russia's structural collapse. Large landing ships like the Yamal and Filchenkov date back to the Soviet era. Their mass production has long since ceased. These ships are products of the 1970s and 80s. At that time, the Soviet Union had massive shipyard capacity, an unlimited labor force, and a centrally planned economy. Today's Russia is far removed from that capacity. Shipyards that could launch dozens of ships a year during the Soviet era now struggle for years just to complete a single frigate. Today, for all of Russia's fleets, the Baltic, Pacific, and Black Sea, these half-century-old Soviet-era ships bear the brunt of both passenger and cargo transport. And these ships are disappearing one by one. Russia's only new large landing ship project is the Ivan Gren class, but Kovalenko describes this project as quite unsuccessful. Construction of the first ship, the Ivan Gren, began in 2004, but it didn't enter service until 2018. 14 years. 14 years for a single ship. The second ship, the Pyotr Morganov, also faced similar delays. At this pace, replacing the Yamal and Filchenkov with new ships would take decades, and Ukraine isn't giving Russia that time. Because building a new ship takes 5 to 7 years, and during that time, the shipyards remain vulnerable to Ukrainian drone attacks. The Askold corvette had already been hit before it even entered service. Even Russia's shipyards aren't safe. Ukraine isn't just destroying the current fleet, it's destroying the fleet of the future. And there's another restriction coming into play here, perhaps the most critical one: the Montreux Convention. This restriction is often overlooked, but its consequences are massive. The Montreux Convention, in effect since 1936, imposes strict limitations on warships passing through the Turkish Straits. Russia cannot move large warships from the Baltic Fleet to the Black Sea. It cannot send reinforcements from the Northern Fleet. It cannot withdraw ships from the Pacific. Every ship lost in the Black Sea is a permanent and irreplaceable loss. You cannot borrow from another fleet, transfer ships, or temporarily deploy them. Whatever is in the Black Sea is all there is, and it is dwindling. Consider the vicious cycle this situation creates. The more ships Russia loses, the greater the operational burden on the remaining ships. Trying to control the same maritime area with fewer ships means longer patrols, less maintenance time, and greater fatigue. Fatigued and poorly maintained ships become more prone to breakdowns, and a malfunctioning or slowed-down ship is an easier target for Ukrainian drones. Every loss makes the next one easier, a vicious cycle. The issue of repairs is just as hopeless as that of replacement. The radar and control systems on the bridge exceed Russia's domestic production capacity. During the Soviet era, these systems were produced under a centrally planned economy. Today, most of those factories have either closed or remain in Ukraine. Due to sanctions, microelectronics cannot be sourced from the West. China provides alternative parts, but the quality and compatibility issues are massive. Integrating Chinese electronics into 50-year-old systems designed to Soviet standards is an engineering nightmare. And the shipyards where Russia could carry out these repairs are also on Ukraine's target list. The repair facilities in Sevastopol have already been hit. Capacity in Novorossiysk is limited. Russia is struggling to find a safe place to repair even a damaged ship. As Kovalenko put it, these ships may be able to move, but they will never be able to fully carry out their combat missions. And consider the most dramatic loss, the Moskva, a $750 million flagship. Russia hasn't been able to refurbish it for 4 years. It has neither the ships, the budget, nor the shipyard capacity to replace it. Since the Moskva sank, Russia hasn't added a single new large warship to the Black Sea. And as this period drags on, the chance of adding one diminishes. It's only a matter of time before the remaining 3 to 4 large landing ships share the same fate. The fleet is confined to Soviet-era reserves, and those reserves are running out. As a result, Russia has entered a full-fledged strategic deadlock at sea. It cannot replace what it has lost. It cannot repair the damaged ones. It cannot protect what remains. And since it cannot bring reinforcements through the straits, there is no way out of this deadlock. The impact of this collapse on the power balance in the Black Sea is massive. Kovalenko's assessment may seem exaggerated at first, but the data supports it. Full control of the Black Sea is currently in Ukraine's hands. A country with virtually no navy is controlling the Black Sea. Because Ukraine has stopped thinking about naval warfare in traditional terms. Instead of building a fleet, it is focused on creating impact. Instead of trying to dominate the sea, it is focused on preventing the enemy from using it. Missiles, naval drones, aerial drones, mines, and special operations. All of these have been integrated into a single, continuously evolving strategy. And this strategy has been refined a little more with every operation. The recent attack in Crimea represents the pinnacle of this refinement. It didn't just strike the ships, it jammed the radars, rendering them blind, cut off communications, collapsing coordination, and struck fuel depots, halting operations. Each element reinforced the others. Each strike made the next one easier. These are no longer random attacks. They are a campaign rewriting the new rules of naval warfare. On a geopolitical scale, Russia's collapse in the Black Sea is permanently altering regional balances. Russia once viewed this sea as its own lake. It projected power into the Mediterranean via the Black Sea, implementing a naval doctrine extending to the Suez and beyond. Now it cannot even navigate there freely. The fleet's dissolution has effectively collapsed this power projection. NATO's southern flank has been relieved. Romania and Bulgaria's maritime security concerns have significantly diminished. Turkey has been freed from Russian pressure over the straits, and Ukraine's grain export corridor has been indirectly strengthened. Because Russian ships in the Black Sea are no longer in a position to threaten commercial vessels. But the most direct impact is on Crimea and the land front. The loss of these large landing ships has effectively halted the maritime transport of troops, armored vehicles, and ammunition to the peninsula. These ships were not merely floating platforms. They were the lifeline providing logistics to Crimea and the southern front. A single landing ship could carry dozens of armored vehicles, hundreds of soldiers, and hundreds of tons of ammunition in a single trip. Now that capacity has been reduced to zero. Taking them out of commission means not only that Russia has lost ships, but that it has lost the logistical backbone of the southern front. Supply is now largely dependent on the Kerch Bridge and the highway. But the bridge is constantly being closed due to drone alerts, the railway ferries have been destroyed, and transport via the highway through Donbass is both much longer and within HIMARS range. Crimea is being isolated both by sea and by land. This is precisely the strategy that retired US General Hodges has been outlining for months. Cut Crimea off from the world, make it militarily unsustainable, and eventually take it over. And as the fleet collapses, this strategy is unfolding not on paper, but on the ground. As the fleet collapses, the Russian military presence in Crimea becomes unsustainable. The strategy of using the peninsula as a military fortress is crumbling, and the legendary 240-year-old Russian naval base in Sevastopol is now an open target for Ukrainian drones. Russian troops on the Kherson and Zaporizhia fronts are also feeling this collapse directly. Ammo and armored vehicles that can't be delivered by sea must be transported by land. But land transport is slower, more vulnerable, and far more expensive. The logistical flow at the front is getting thinner every month, and this dwindling supply directly reduces the Russian troops' combat capability. Putin's "Crimea is ours" rhetoric is eroding in practice. Because claiming ownership of a territory you cannot defend militarily, cannot supply by sea, and that becomes increasingly isolated day by day, is becoming increasingly meaningless. From the perspective of arms exports, the picture is a nightmare for Russia. Who would want to buy weapons from a country whose navy is melting away in the Black Sea, that cannot protect its S-400s, and whose ships are being sunk by cheap drones? Russia's global arms exports were already in decline, and every ship sunk accelerates that decline. But perhaps the deepest impact is at the paradigm level. Ukraine has repeatedly proven that it doesn't need a navy to win a naval war. It was enough to understand the battlefield better than its opponent. This is not merely a military success. It is a transformation that upends the fundamental assumptions of modern naval warfare. Naval forces around the world are currently analyzing Ukraine's combat data because the rules of future naval conflicts are being written here. Traditional large ships, billion-dollar destroyers, aircraft carriers, amphibious assault ships have become defenseless against cheap unmanned systems. Radars, command systems, and ports have emerged as the weakest links. And Russia's reliance on its Soviet legacy is the most painful aspect of this defeat. The fleet is indeed turning into museum pieces, just as Kovalenko said. This lesson applies not only to Russia, but to every country, from China to India, from Iran to North Korea, that plans to wage war based on traditional naval concepts. The Black Sea has become a laboratory for the new naval war, and the results are striking. For Russia, the picture is bleak from every angle. The fleet is dwindling and cannot be replenished. Crimea is becoming isolated and indefensible. Control of the Black Sea has been permanently lost. Logistical lines are growing thinner by the month. And Ukraine's asymmetric warfare strategy is becoming more sophisticated and deadly with every operation. Economically, the burden is crushing Russia. Every ship sunk or damaged represents a loss of hundreds of millions of dollars. The Yamal cost $80 million, the Filchenkov $70 million, and the Moskva alone $750 million. The total cost of fleet losses has long since surpassed billions of dollars. The repair budget is ballooning, but due to sanctions, spare parts cannot even be found. Fuel depots in Crimea are burning, logistics centers are collapsing, and ground operations are slowing down. Russia's oil revenues have temporarily increased thanks to the war in Iran. Urals crude has risen above $100 per barrel, but the damage caused by Ukrainian drones to the energy infrastructure is preventing Russia from fully benefiting from these revenues. Having lost approximately 20% of its export capacity, Russia is not reaping the full benefits of rising prices. The war economy is taking blows from every corner of the front, and the losses on the naval front are the costliest of these blows. Kovalenko's words perhaps sum it up best. Russia has lost control of the Black Sea, and it will never regain it. This may sound exaggerated, but the picture is clear when you look at the 4-year campaign stretching from the sinking of the Moskva to the decommissioning of the Yamal. A country without a navy has destroyed a third of the superpower's fleet, and it's not stopping. The most bitter irony is this: Putin launched this war to prevent Ukraine from moving closer to NATO. In the end, it lost its 240-year-old naval supremacy in the Black Sea. Crimea has become indefensible, and Ukraine is teaching the world's navies the future of naval warfare. As the smoke rises from burning ships in Sevastopol Bay, Putin's dream of Black Sea dominance is burning along with them, and this legend will never return.